Agenda are appointments of some police officers, so I think we're going to do that first. So we're going to take that out of order, and then we'll get to our normal agenda. But before we do that, just a couple of announcements. The town recently learned that it's requested the Central Transportation Planning staff of the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization for study of the section of Route 9 extending through Brookline from Washington Street to the Newton border has been approved, and the study will study the corridor for multimodal transportation solutions addressing pedestrian, bicycle, trucks, and transit modes. And we saw the first, I think, installment of that at the Gateway East, where we're putting in some bicycle accommodations. So the purpose of this study is to see if we can extend things like that further, but a broader kind of approach. And hopefully the results of the study will inform our planning of the Route 9 corridor for the next generation. So this is pretty exciting stuff, and we're not even paying for it, which makes it even more exciting. I'm also pleased to announce that the fundraising for the John Wilson sculpture donation has been successful, has been completed. The group organizing the sculpture donation has raised almost $100,000, and we'll be planning a celebration of the donation at the end of January. So this is a very exciting thing. Want to say something?
It's exciting.
Looked like you want to say something.
No, I just got here.
Yeah. That's what the end of January, weather permitting, right? I think they were planning on doing it in the lobby. Okay. So, with that, all that said, unless my colleagues have announcements, we'll do some more announcements after the police appointments. Chief Lipson.
Good evening. Thank you. This is a happy and exciting occasion to be here before the Select Board to request your approval to swear in 7 probationary Brookline police officers. These 7 student officers have just completed comprehensive training at the Lowell Police Academy. These student officers have made a choice to enter the policing profession at a challenging time and have worked hard to get to this point. This is a unique group of officers, as all 7 are veterans who have already made a commitment to serve our country and are now committing to serving our community as police officers. We look forward to seeing them grow as police officers. We look forward to the initial training that they will have in the training division, which they will undergo in-house training, and then they will begin riding with experienced Brookline police officers. I would just like to take a moment to introduce the officers that we are requesting appointment for to the Brookline Police Department. Sean Turpin. Mr. Turpin is 25 years old and originally from South Hamilton, Mass. He graduated from Hamilton Wenham High School in 2001. In 2012, he enlisted in the Army and served until 2016. He's currently enrolled in a Bachelor's of Criminal Justice program at Fisher College. Sean McGoldrick. Mr. McGoldrick is 24 years old and originally from Mansfield, Mass. He graduated from Mansfield High School in 2012. Mr. McGoldrick enlisted in the Marines in 2012 and served until 2017. Prior to the police academy, he is enrolled in a Bachelor's of Criminal Justice program at UMass Boston while working as an EMT with Brewster Ambulance. Mr. McGoldrick plans to pursue his degree. Timothy Burt. Mr. Burt is 33 years old and graduated from King Philip High School in 2003. Mr. Burt enlisted in the Army and served as an Army Ranger from 2006 to 2011, during which time he went on 5 deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. He graduated second in his class at the Lowell Police Academy and was chosen as the class treasurer and selected by the Academy instructors to be the lead student officer for the final months of training. Kavi Jagannath. Mr. Jagannath is 27 years old and from Quincy. He graduated from UMass Boston with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. Mr. Jagannath enlisted in the Marine Corps in 2012. Since 2015, he has worked as a corrections officer with the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department. Ryan Silman. Mr. Silman is 27 years old and from Everett. He graduated from Everett High School in 2008. Mr. Silman enlisted in the Army National Guard and serves as an aviation operator. He's scheduled to complete his service in 2020. Prior to the police academy, he was employed as a security officer at the Massachusetts General Hospital. Juan Pena. Mr. Pena is 23 years old and is from Beverly. He graduated from Beverly High School in 2013. Mr. Pena enlisted in the Army in 2013 and served until 2017. He's a member of the Army National Guard. Prior to attending the police academy, he was employed as a security officer for the Department of Army at the U.S. Army Labs in Natick. Jason Holland. Mr. Holland is 34 years old and originally from Guilderland, New York. Mr. Holland enlisted in the Army in 2010 and served 3 years as an infantryman, including a tour in Afghanistan. He graduated from the University of Hawaii with a bachelor's in public administration and a double minor in criminal justice and disaster management. He was employed as a civilian police officer for the Department of the Air Force prior to entering the police academy. Thank you for your consideration of these officers.
Okay, so I'll start with a welcome aboard, and not only to you, but I see family members here. As members of the Brookline Police Department, we expect a lot of you. The community expects a lot of you, and we have high standards that I know and hope that you'll meet up to those high standards and continue the good reputation of the department.
I will join the chair in saying thank you for stepping up and being willing to serve those of us who live in this community and those around Eastern Massachusetts. And thank you to your families as well. This is a job that requires a lot of you, and that means less time at home, tough hours, and a stressful job, particularly at this time when it's difficult to be a police officer, not only here in Brookline, but across the country. I want to welcome you to the police department here in Brookline, and I think you could land in no better place. We pride ourselves in having close collaboration between all our departments, and particularly our public service departments. So welcome. Hopefully we'll see you back here not too shortly for a promotion or a commendation, and best of luck. And please feel free to reach out to any of us if we can support you in any way.
Well, I third what both the chair and Select Person Franco said. I also noticed that on your resumes, you've all had military experience. The Marines, the Army Reserves, the tours of duty in various places, and I would imagine that gives you some leg up in terms of police work and familiarity with some of the rules and regulations you're going to come across, but I hope that it helps you in understanding the job and that you will represent Brookline to the best of your ability. So thank you.
Well, thank you also. As Select Person Franco noted, it's very difficult being a police in this current environment, and therefore it's very important that towns like Brookline recruit really the best people for the police force. We note that all of you were veterans. That's an important aspect of what you're going to be, or important in terms of what we're going to expect from you. You know how to focus on a mission, work as a team, be disciplined, and be serious in terms of the job that you have before you. You learn that in the military, and that's going to be something that we really will need here on the police force. So, welcome, and we look forward to great things from all of you.
Since I get to go last, I'll try to make it very brief. I still remember when we were authorizing these positions, and we spent a great deal of discussion talking about these theoretical people who were away serving their country and having the opportunity to secure a place for them in Brookline should they come back and want to be in our community. So I'm so thrilled to actually meet all of you, because this was a little bit of a time ago, so one tends to forget. But I also want to be one of the first people to say Happy Veterans Day, since that's right around the corner. So welcome and Happy Veterans Day.
Okay, so now the formal part is I will move that we appoint the following 7 student officers as probationary police officers effective November 7th. That's today. Okay, Sean Turpin, Sean P. McGoldrick, Timothy Burke, Kavi N. Jagannath, Ryan D. Silman, Juan Pena, and Jason Holland. All those in favor, please say aye. Select Person Franco.
Aye.
Select Person Heller.
Aye.
Select Person Green. Aye. Select Person Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Welcome aboard. So you do the pinning, and Mr. Ward, you're here to swear the officers in?
Yeah, Chairman.
So however you guys want to do it.
Have to stand on the wall. Gentlemen, congratulations. It's going to be really easy. I'm just going to ask you to repeat everything I say except for your names, okay? Raise your right hand, please. I repeat your name.
I, Tommy Jackson,
Do you solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will faithfully and impartially
that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge all the duties incumbent upon me
discharge all the duties incumbent upon me
as a police officer for the town of Brookline,
as a police officer of the town of Brookline,
according to the best of my ability and understanding,
according to the best of my ability and understanding,
agreement to the rules and regulations of the Constitution,
agreeing to the rules and regulations of the Constitution,
the laws of the Commonwealth,
the laws of the Commonwealth,
and under rules, regulations, and bylaws,
and under the rules, regulations, and bylaws,
and under authority thereon.
and under the authority thereon.
Here you go. We're never going to go to the names now, the officers, for the step forward. He's just posing.
Congratulations. 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 Congratulations.
I don't want any parts, no speeding. Nothing like
Congratulations. Now you're stuck taking a picture with us. Congratulations. Let's somehow scrunch up. let's get the politicians out of the way. You guys take a picture. Okay, good stuff.
Quiet group. So continuing with our announcements, the Baldwin Building Committee is meeting tomorrow morning at 7:30 for continuing consideration of that project.
Yes, it is.
Yep. And then on Sunday, in front of Town Hall is the annual Veterans Day observance. And I have exciting news. Select Person Green is going to be the featured speaker.
I'll try to make
for
it
the
as
select board.
exciting as possible.
11 a.m. on Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah, and I see Mr. Ward, don't go. No, you don't. We just had an election yesterday with about, 66% voter turnout, which is, presidential year kind of numbers. It's funny, I ran into Mr. Ward at the polls, and I said, this seems like presidential year numbers, and Mr. Ward was very skeptical at that point. It was midday, but my prognostication came true. But I want to compliment you and your staff and the folks who came on for the day. It is a long day. Starts at 6 in the morning?
Even before that.
And for you before that. And then you've had early voting. About how many folks voted early this year?
We had 6,040 vote early.
6,040 vote early, so that's roughly a little under 10%, which is probably a little less than happened at the presidential.
We had 11,784.
Versus 11,784 at the presidential. So, okay. So there were more people actually voting on Election Day. So with the crowds and by all reports, it seemed to go pretty smoothly. A few little glitches here and there, but
Election day.
right. We don't have any of the stories you hear in some other parts of the country, and I think that's a testament to you and your staff and the way you run elections. So I thank you on behalf of the board and on behalf of the citizens of Brookline.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to say that I do have a fabulous staff, and the election workers that we hire for the polling locations, they're dedicated individuals that basically go through a very stressful day and do the best they can to make it efficient and effective for people to vote. And we're happy for it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else? Okay, public comment. We have a lot of people signed up for public comment, and I'll ask, our policy is to try and spend no more than 15 minutes, so I'll ask you, let's try not to spend more than 15 minutes, but I'm not going to sit here with the hook.
You mean totally?
Yeah. So, and then the other thing I'll say, I see 5 folks signed up for the same topic. So the thing I say at all public hearings, this isn't a public hearing, but I'll say it anyway. If someone else has made the same point, please, you can always say, I agree with so-and-so and make an additional point. So, Ms.
Excuse me, can you sign me up there? I didn't realize you had to put your name there.
Okay, so we have 6 now. Okay, off the conquest. Mr. Lynn Jones, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Wyszynski and members of the Select Board. I'm Sean Lynn Jones. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 1, and I live at 53 Monmouth Street. I'm here tonight with some of my friends and neighbors because we're very concerned about the proposed marijuana retail store at 1032 Beacon Street, the former site of the Waxy's Bar. In the 24 years that I've lived in the neighborhood, I've never seen so many people mobilized and so many people worried about a particular issue. And this has all happened just in a matter of weeks because most of the neighbors had no idea that this store was even likely until they just found out about it. Now, I realize that this issue is not on your agenda for the evening, and so I don't think we'll take up too much time during the public comment period. And we have talked to one another about making sure there's no unnecessary repetition. But I would like to turn this over to some of my neighbors who have signed up to let them have something to say about this because there is such deep concern about it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Mr. Warren is next.
Yes, thank you. Sorry for the cart, but there's a lot of paper. My name is Paul Warren. I live at 71 Carlton Street. My lovely wife who's standing in the back. Up until 3 weeks ago, and you got a box. You need a bigger box now, my friend. Up until 3 weeks ago, I was a stay-at-home dad of a 4-year-old beautiful daughter and our son who's 1. He's 13 months. Today, I lead a grassroots effort that's generated an overwhelming opposition to Ascend's application for a retail marijuana store at 1032 Beacon Street. Each one of these bundles I have here on the cart represents 707 individual letters signed by residents, friends, and relatives that frequent and enjoy the St. Mary's District. And these letters are addressed to you. So I'd like to leave them with you for informational purposes, and perhaps they could be distributed. Thank you.
I believe you're not going to leave the hand truck, right?
No, I can leave them. What would you like me to do with them?
I don't know. Yeah.
You don't need a hand.
Well, we probably do, but.
You probably do.
And clipped up front is the press releases that we've been putting out in some summaries.
Ms. Silbar.
Hi, how are you? I think you all know me. I'm Kate Silbaugh, town meeting member of Precinct 1. And like you, I was initially impressed by the higher standard Ascend advertised. My view on that changed after the community meetings. 140 people came to the first community meeting, overcrowding the room, and surprised Ascend, I believe. And Ascend seemed to come to the second meeting with a plan to go on the offense and showed us a very concerning strong-arming quality that I'd like to share with you while it's still fresh. First, at the door, Ascend attempted to exclude from the meeting all of the leaders of the effort to contest this site. Ascend came prepared with red cards that they gave to those they wanted to exclude and yellow cards to those they wanted to admit. I was given a red card, as was Joel Ives, rector of the Church of Our Savior. There was some shouting from outside to the effect of, "You're excluding town meeting members and priests, it's our neighborhood, let us in," and so forth. And with some negotiation between me and the fire marshal, I was admitted. But 60 people never entered due to a combination of overcrowding and their red card system. Ascend controlled who those 60 people were. Second, the entire night, Ascend's head of security stood uncomfortably close to every single speaker, within arm's reach of the podium, like here, facing them, and stared them down, and almost everyone who spoke found it intimidating and said so. I can document that if you'd like. Indeed, at one point, he actively badgered a BHS student with questions about her exposure to cannabis at the BHS, which was incredibly inappropriate, and I've never witnessed anything like it at a meeting in this town. A senior Ascend official, in full view of the crowd, pulled a respected neighborhood leader into the back room and scolded him for this, for relaying the contents of a newspaper article about Ascend owner Abner Curtin at the first meeting. And then this Ascend official delivered a threat from Curtin, who was displeased that the newspaper article had come up. And he said he was putting the neighbor on notice. When a different community leader spoke Mildly out of turn, Ascend's head of security approached him, pointed at him and said, "You're done." And he was then told that if he said another word, he would be removed from the meeting. There was no reason whatsoever to single out this particular guy's behavior in the way that the meeting was unfolding, other than that he was a leader. Later that night, his house was egged. It was that kind of level of strong-arming and intimidation by Ascend that led to a considered judgment to advise members of the public not to attend the third meeting. And I understand some of you were there. Finally, at the first meeting, Ascend said they wanted to offer the community complete transparency, so the community requested a range of documents so that we could better understand their organization, and they agreed to provide those things at that meeting number 1, but by meeting number 2, they had reversed course on just about everything and had a very different attitude, saying they're going to disclose only what's legally required and only when it's legally required, which is too late in this process. And it was a noteworthy shift from an organization that had advertised itself coming in as having a higher standard. So I encourage this board to favor the free flow of information, and I trust that you're not going to accept Ascend's suppression of vital material, information, and projections about their operation and its impact on the neighborhood. This was not a good neighbors meet the community meeting. It isn't an entirely private meeting, since it's a legal requirement of their licensing process. I came today to tell you that it definitely violated any standards for a public hearing, from excluding key leaders to bullying and threatening speakers. I wanted to be sure you don't take Ascend's higher standard representation at face value, and that you do your due diligence here before entering any agreements with them. Thank you.
Kate, can you leave your notes with, if you were reading,
Yeah.
Yes, so it can go into the record? Next up, I can't read the handwriting.
That's my handwriting. I'll have to help you with that. My name's Chris Tesouris.
That's what it says.
That's what it says. I reside on Beacon Street, directly across from the 1032 location, and I've been a resident of Brookline there happily for 12 years. I'm also a zoning and permitting attorney with the law firm Pasternak, Blankstein, and Lund. I represent Save St. Mary's Neighborhood Corp., a nonprofit organization that's been formed by St. Mary's residential and business neighbors to oppose Ascend's application at this L District location. We will be in contact with the board shortly, seeking to initiate constructive dialogue and ask that you remain open and that you remain receptive to the views and the needs of the community as Ascend's HCA application proceeds before you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kimball.
Thank you, Chairman Wyszynski, and thank you, Select Board. I'm Range Kimball, Brookline resident, and let me just wrap up this much shorter than 15-minute block with some real structure to help frame our thinking. I'll go through 4 things with some analysis. First, it is wrong to think that all marijuana retail siting is controversial, and that this is just yet another controversy. That is just wrong. This is the 3-page list of all 180 marijuana licenses, either prospectively approved or pending in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Many of them have actually been actively sought by the community, such as Holyoke and Northampton. Some have had modest local opposition and modest local support. Some have been controversial, but with some strong supporters. None have had anywhere near the volume, what you see in this community, those unified orange hats blocking Beacon Street sidewalk, the 707 letters. This is unique in the annals of the Commonwealth in our marijuana experience by an enormous amount. This is a list, my mom lives in Seattle, I've been out there, of all 398 retail marijuana sites in Washington State. Only a handful were modestly controversial, and none rise to the level of overwhelming neighborhood tsunami. So first, it is wrong to say it's just always going to be controversial, and that's 1032 Beacon. Second, it's wrong to say this is a local business. Using Ascend's own volume data, and I have a lot of experience doing business data analytics, less than 5% of the volume in that store would come from the residents of Precinct 1. It is not remotely a local business. 95 to 96% of its customer volume will come from outside the district, and given its size, many far outside. It is not a retail store. It is a regional magnet store. It is hopelessly at odds in its size and its enormous revenue projections with any concept of a local retail L district. Third, it's wrong to say that this high-end approach to marijuana will fit on that block in St. Mary's. You should have listened to the way they proudly described their security and their store that first night we were there. Blacked out windows and opaque windows. Unmarked black Sprinter vans driving randomized routes, unloading product at randomized times. Conspicuous uniformed security guards present at all times. A double entry door system where one door always must be locked and IDs are checked at both. Product kept locked in a separate floor in a separate room. Product delivered in a locked pneumatic tube in a sealed bag up to the customer. It is not retail as we know it. I visited Los Alamos Nuclear Labs 2 years ago with Duncan McBranch, a friend of mine who's their chief technology officer. I said on the record, while being recorded at that first meeting, the only thing I've been to in years that reminds me of what you just described is visiting the plutonium pit at Los Alamos Nuclear Labs. It is wrong to say that it's the appropriate size. At 6,200 square feet, it will be one of the largest pure retail marijuana shops in America. Again, I've looked at the data in Washington State. You can pull down the tax filings, which I have for every single one. This is a massive store. The big stores in Washington State are at the end of runways next to a casino. They're on an off-ramp in Tacoma off Interstate 5 next to a 160,000 square foot big box Bass Pro Shops retailer. To say that a 6,000 square foot retailer that's going to do $10 million steady state volume belongs in Little St. Mary's is just wrong. And finally, it's wrong to say that this block in Beacon Street, this block in our neighborhood, this block in our town where we all live, is a correct site for a marijuana store. As a few of you may know, I've been privileged to serve 2 governors and Mayor Menino in various government roles, and I've personally overseen as a government official over 400 business siting decisions. I have never seen a more inappropriate site for a proposed place in my entire career. I've also never seen a business proponent, and my job for the taxpayers was to help business get cited. Just what Kate said, I've never seen a business proponent come and treat their potential host community as brusquely and as rudely. I think my neighbor Trudy used the phrase fending off. You felt like you were being fended off when she was talked. So I wanted to step back and wrap up with where I started to put some framework on it. You may have approached this and seen Sean and Kate and Paul and Chris and I and thought this is going to be a difficult night. You may think this is going to be a difficult process. And I'll actually put your minds at rest, select people. It will not be. This site and this proponent are so wrong by such an astronomical margin, with so much overwhelming opposition, it is not remotely a difficult decision. It would be astounding to allow this to properly proceed. When you apply data, analysis, common sense even, this just does not even remotely work on any dimension. You will not see a marijuana retailer proposal like this in Massachusetts, and I doubt we'll see one in the United States. So as Chris said, and then I'll wrap up, and thank you very much for letting us all be here. As you even start to consider this, we have a lot of data. We've done a lot of work. We have a lot of information. Please include us in even the very preliminary discussion so we can help you become informed and clear. Thank you very much. And with that, we'll
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. And I've never felt safer. But we can bring them back, or we can send you the copies if you want in the record.
Yes, send us. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Conquest.
Somebody leave it. Oh, this is okay. Arthur Conquest, 116 Tappan Street, Town Meeting, Precinct 6. Just before I say what I want to say, let me just make a little minor observation. The cadets that you, or the policemen that you swore in tonight, anybody notice anything?
No women?
No women.
Yep, I noticed.
I think the town's got a little bit of work to do. Okay? I think women make up 53% of the population.
But how many veterans do they make up?
I'm not sure.
Smaller number.
Okay, but still.
We recruit from non-veterans also. So that's not
Yeah.
Right, but I think these authorizations were specifically held over for people who are serving.
For veterans? But I'm sure that, okay.
Point well taken.
Yeah, point well taken, but
I'm going to move on.
But I'll also say that this class was unusual in that the previous number of classes have had a different mix of women.
Okay, it was an observation.
But I noticed.
Okay, second, and I'll cut this short. Can you give me any information about the Indigenous Peoples Commission? It passed town meeting, I think, about a year ago, and part of the warrant article was that you establish a commission?
Committee.
And I attended the Indigenous Peoples Day celebration downtown this year, and ran into one of the members of the group that worked on getting the committee together. And she mentioned, well, when is Brookline going to have its committee in operation? So I just asked that. You don't have to answer it now, but please, at some point.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Let's get into our agenda. Put my glasses on. We have some minutes. October 23rd, I have a small change. All those in favor of adopting the minutes as amended, please say aye. Selectperson Franco.
Aye.
Selectperson Heller. Selectperson Green.
Aye.
Selectperson Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Yeah.
Chair Wyszynski, I should have brought this up at the board comment section, but I noticed in the minutes that I'm reminded by the minutes that we received the oysters from Oyster Bay on the 23rd, and I hope that we sent them a thank you.
I spoke with them and sent them photos.
Okay.
Yes.
Select person Hamilton and I took some of the oysters. I cooked them.
Ooh.
I was afraid to eat them raw, but they were incredibly good. So I'd like to convey to the people of Oyster Bay that they're excellent.
I will let them know. I've actually struck up quite a friendship with the assistant to the town supervisor.
I don't know what your experience was with them.
They were a big hit at the house party that I went to that weekend.
Okay. So, we have a few miscellaneous items. We have a contract for bituminous concrete patches. Mr. Ditto, we're about to spend a lot of money on concrete.
Or coal.
Or blacktop.
Bituminous concrete.
Bituminous.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So on October 4th, the Public Works Department opened bids for contract PW 19-11, repair of bituminous concrete patches. We received 3 bids, of which Mario Susi was the low qualified bidder at $297,851.11. This contract pretty much is spelled out in the title, and that's repair of concrete, bituminous concrete patches. The low bidder is very familiar with the town. Mario Susi has been working, in the last 10 years. I think he's been in town for 5 of those 10 years, so he knows the town well. We're very happy with his work, and if you approve his contract tonight, we will have him in next week, trying to get some work done before the snow comes.
Okay. Any questions about bituminous concrete?
I'm struck by the wide range of bids, particularly from the high bidder. Is this a case of the high bidder being very busy and thought they would just throw a bid in to see if we would bite on it?
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, I understand that we might get forecasting snow for next week.
Really?
So, yeah, Wednesday and Thursday. So Maybe they better work
Maybe a
fast.
short season.
Yeah. Don't say that out loud.
I'll knock on some wood.
The yes word.
Okay, I'll move that we award and execute the contract for repair of bituminous concrete patches in the amount of $297,851.11 with Mario Susi and Sons. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectperson Franco.
Aye.
Selectperson Heller.
Aye.
Selectperson Green.
Aye.
Selectperson Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I learned how to pronounce a word tonight. And we have a question of authorizing the chair to execute 2 documents on behalf of the Brookline Housing Authority in advance of its rental assistance application with HUD. Mr. Fiola.
Good evening, Joe Viola, Assistant Director for Community Planning. As the board heard a few months back from an update with Patrick Dober, BHA Executive Director, they're looking to undertake a long-term preservation initiative using a program called the RAD program, Rental Assistance Demonstration Program. Under RAD, a number of townwide BHA developments will benefit from capital improvements. Very soon, the BHA will submit what's known as a RAD financing plan to HUD for the O'Shea House on Park Street, which, if it's successful, if the financing plan is successful, could provide the BHA with the means to undertake capital improvements at that development, thereby preserving and improving housing stock for both current and future residents. We're here tonight because prior to submitting the RAD financing plan, HUD requires that the Housing Authority submit what's known as an environmental review. Environmental review is something that the town does every year for our block grant program. Whenever you're getting federal funds or you're accessing a federal program, it's a requirement that we have to undertake. And essentially what it is, it's a review of a project's impact on the surrounding environment. It's as simple as I can put it. The town is known, what is known as a responsible entity. We act as a responsible entity for environmental reviews. And in this case, since given our familiarity with the process, we were asked to do it on behalf of the Housing Authority for this RAD submission. We worked with a BHA consultant to complete an environmental assessment, which required us to hold, to put a public notice and to hold a 15-day public comment period. The assessment was available starting on October 18th. The public comment process was finished on November 1st. We didn't receive any comments over that period. So now that the notice and comment process has passed, we're asking the board to vote to execute 2 related documents: the environmental review record and also a request for release of funds and certification. And these documents will certify to HUD that the Housing Authority in town we've both met the environmental review procedural requirements. So after the vote tonight, the Housing Authority has to submit that request for release of funds to HUD for its own another 15-day public comment period, after which they can actually submit their financing plan submission. So we're basically trying to help the Housing Authority to get in line to access the RAD program.
Okay. Any questions from the board? It seems like a circuitous process.
It is.
But hopefully the result will be a good one. Okay, so I'll move that we authorize the chair as certifying officer for the responsible entity to execute 2 documents on behalf of the Brookline Housing Authority in advance of its rental assistance demonstration, RAD, finance plan submission to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, for the proposed O'Shea House project, an environmental review record, and a request for release of funds and certification. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectperson Franco?
Aye.
Selectperson Heller?
Aye.
Selectperson Green?
Aye.
Selectperson Hamilton?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Chief Sullivan, you want to transfer some money around?
Indeed. Thank you, Mr. Chair. John Sullivan, Fire Chief. And for the record, I won't use any words like bituminous or, and I'm asking for $240,000 less than Mr. Ditto did. The request that you have before you is to transfer $57,000 from the equipment, Public Safety Equipment Fund that is in our fiscal 2019 budget to newly established item of budgeted capital for the purposes of creating a second driveway at the new training facility down on Hammond Street. The background to this is that the project did not adequately take into consideration the amount of traffic that would be utilizing that facility in its newer in its new purpose. So we, in the process of reviewing during the construction phase, I have some photos for you, if I may, for you to see where the construction has already leveled a surface to have utility access that would serve as a wonderful site for a second driveway. As you know, that station only has a single lane driveway to the right side of the station that is about 300 feet long and only has the ability to access one apparatus or vehicle at a time. It is in close proximity to the curve just after the rotary, which makes it a very dangerous place to come in and out of. The current construction that's there has done some grading work and some compacting work to fill the utility trench that they built already. This would just expand that project a little bit, and we'd be able to utilize the equipment that's on scene right now and save some money in the future. If we were to go forward with this in a project in the future, they'd be able to use the equipment that's on scene now, saving some cost savings there. The $57,000 that I'm proposing from the equipment was earmarked for upgrading of 12 Apex 5000 radios in anticipation of those particular radios were third generation out from what we're utilizing right now. But those are now, they're serviceable radios, but they would have been well beyond the original intent for those radios. At this point, the police department and fire department are proposing in the next CIP for a replacement of the entire radio system, which would make this particular request for these 12 radios to be somewhat superfluous. They're manageable to get through until that item happens. Those particular radios would be replaced as a result of the larger capital investment into the radio system. So at this point, we understand that we need to go before the capital subcommittee of the advisory committee as well as the public safety committee to authorize this transfer. I've been in contact with Mr. Lynn Jones as well as the other members of those committees and set up some meetings with them. I'll actually be going to the site with members of the public safety subcommittee tomorrow so that they can review the site as well. So if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Really, advisory has to approve this one?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Seems pretty straightforward to me.
Is it a little ironic that there's only one egress on a fire department parcel?
Would you allow that on an apartment building development?
The current access driveway is also abuts some wetlands and is right at the margin of our parcel, so that cannot be expanded in this aspect. So we will also be looking to expand the use of the training facility in the back to accommodate what is now a polling site up front. We would propose, and I've already talked to Mr. Ward about moving the polling place into the training division at that time so that there's no conflict with we still be hosts for the polling site, but we'd have a much nicer and separate area for the polls to be.
And then you'd have to make accommodations for cars coming in and out.
Right.
I would guess that the only argument for your ability to retain the one egress is that you have sirens and, you know, you can get out much faster than residents of an apartment building.
Well, yes. We don't use that particular egress for the fire trucks themselves unless they're going to the back to the training division, but that certainly would really help and it would be a great addition, as well as a safety measure to come in and out of that. We would propose that the the driveway that's there now becomes the inbound driveway, and then the exit would be the new proposed driveway, which has a better sight line down Hammond Street.
Sounds like a plan to me.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so I will move that we approve the transfer within the fire department appropriation of $57,000 from public safety equipment to general contracting. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectperson Franco.
Aye.
Selectperson Heller.
Aye.
Selectperson Green. Aye. Selectperson Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Don't go anywhere.
Thank you.
Let's do, you have a personnel item
Yes,
for
Mr.
us.
Chair.
So we're, number 9, so let's just, might as well do that. And
Again, pursuant to the information that you have, the fire department is requesting authorization to fill 2 vacancies through promotion, one at the level of deputy chief and the other at the level of captain. We had a recent retirement of a deputy chief from the department, which created these vacancies. The only reason we're not asking for the entire trickle-down effect is because we have already exhausted the lieutenant's list, and we actually have we've asked for a new exam, which will be occurring in 2 weeks, and we're hopeful to get that certified list. We have a number of folks that are taking it. I believe we have upwards of 25 members of the department who are planning on taking the lieutenant's exam, which is a great number, and we will fill that last vacancy and come before you to fill that last vacancy once we have an established list on a permanent basis. Until that time, we would be temporarily filling that spot.
okay. And these are all civil service, take them off the list.
Civil service, take them off the list. We are conducting interviews this coming week with the top 3 candidates in both the deputy chief and captain's positions.
Okay. Any questions?
Deputy chief is still civil service?
Yes, the only 2 positions in the fire department that are not civil service are the chief of operations and the chief of department.
Right. Okay. All those in favor of authorizing the filling of 2 vacancies in the fire department for deputy chief and captain, please say aye. Selectperson Franco.
Aye.
Selectperson Heller.
Aye.
Selectperson Green. Aye. Selectperson Hamilton.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Gesundheit.
And Chief Lipson, we see you again. This is for accepting a grant. Jumping backwards.
Good evening again. I'm pleased to inform you that the police department has been awarded the fiscal year 2019 State 911 Department Training Grant and EMD Regulatory Compliance Grant from the state's E911 grant program. The grant's in the amount of $18,760, and the majority of this funding will be used for expenses for training new dispatchers and continuing education for our dispatchers. In addition, it will allow for software upgrades to our EMD program.
I'm going to apologize before I ask you the question, but I'll ask you the question anyway. In Sunday's Globe in the magazine, there was a long article about an unfortunate situation in Somerville where a person with an asthma attack was locked out of a hospital and called 911, and because of the being behind the times in terms of having GPS capabilities, her location wasn't accurately indicated, and precious minutes were lost, and because of that, she died. So I'm wondering what the state of our 911 system for cell phones is. I know we've been upgrading it, and we've been participating in a state program, and we're one of the early communities to adopt it. Well, I think we are.
That's correct. Boston and Nantucket were the first to get wireless direct phone calls, and we were third in line after them. We're currently up and running with the wireless direct phone calls, which means that if you dial 911 on your cell phone and you're in Brookline, you should be directly routed to our dispatch.
Does the dispatcher get an indication, like on the screen, where the call is coming from?
There are different phases of calls, and statewide, they're upgrading that system. So there are some phone calls, wireless phone calls that we get that are very specific with location information, and then there are what are called phase 2 phone calls, which give us an area. So we may get an area, we'll frequently get hang-up 911 cell phone calls, and we'll know that it's coming from a tower, say, in Brookline Village. That's it. So what we do is we send a cruiser to the area, and they kind of look around, but the technology needs to catch up, and that's coming from the state. It's not in our control right now, but that's the direction we're headed.
It's interesting, if you have Lyft or Uber on your phone, it knows exactly where you are.
Yeah.
So I'm very familiar with the topic of this article because the young woman was actually a work colleague of mine. And it sounds like, based on Chief Lipson's response, we're sort of halfway there, that we're not playing telephone, pardon the pun, between the state police dispatcher and our local Brookline dispatcher. But I agree with the chair that I would like to see the state do better in terms of upgrading the location, the GPS location information that's in the system.
Yeah, and you know what I was thinking too, that article is in Sunday's magazine, should be required reading for dispatch staff. It was very good, and very moving, but also highlighted some of the limitations of our system, and also the importance of passing on important information where the dispatcher had information and didn't pass it on that could have helped locate the woman in distress. So, well, that said, we have a grant. Any questions about the grant? So I'll move that we accept the grant in the amount of $18,760 from the state's E911 grant program. All those in favor, please say aye. Select Person Franco.
Aye.
Select Person Heller.
Aye.
Select Person Green. Aye. Select Person Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And we're down to recreation. Ms. Jackson, we have 2 vacancies for an aquatic supervisor and a resource manager performance analyst. The aquatic supervisor was the topic of the override. It was one of the positions funded by the Prop 2.5 override, so I'm glad to see you moving ahead.
Yes, it is happening. Good evening, Select Board members. So yes, the Assistant Recreation Leader, Aquatic Supervisor, is currently in our FY19 budget, and we are looking for your approval this evening and authorization to hire for this position. The details of this position essentially is that this role will help us greatly to expand our hours of the pool and have proper risk management in place to do so. So this person's role is day-to-day supervision of part-time staff. They will be responsible for trainings and onboarding sessions, and this is a significant chunk of time needed in that position. And then they'll also be on the deck of the pool at least one day a weekend. And that will help us have proper risk management in place. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Okay, so I'll move that we approve the filling of the 2 vacancies in the Recreation Department, an Assistant Recreation Leader, Aquatic Supervisor, and a Resource Manager Performance Analyst. All those in favor, please say aye. Select Person Franco.
Aye.
Select Person Heller.
Aye.
Select Person Green. Aye. Select Person Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we have Mr. Avery interviewing for the Fiscal Advisory Committee. Is Mr. Avery here? Going once? Okay. So we have, the next item is a change in beneficial interests, and this is the application of Gin Brookline, doing business as Gin's Fine Asian Cuisine Sushi Bar, for a change of beneficial interest, removing Zong Rong Wang and Zi Guo Zhang as shareholders.
Yeah, hi, how are you, everyone? My name is Xiu Qing Huang. I'm manager of the Jin Financial Cruising in Brookline. And because I have the transfer staff, have the name is Zhong Nong Huang and Zi Guo Zhang, the shareholder, transfer the stock to the Jin Hua Xie and the Zhong Guo Huang. So the company doesn't have a change. The management doesn't have a change. So we report to ABCC.
12. Oh, here it is. So I see the removal. I don't see the addition.
Replacement?
Excuse me?
The replacement?
Yeah.
I thought they were being assumed by the existing shareholders.
So are there new names?
No, not.
Oh, so you're just removing names?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what the paperwork says.
Yeah.
My understanding is the existing shareholders are assuming that share from those two individuals who are leaving the interests.
Okay. Okay, this is a pretty routine kind of transaction.
I do have one question, maybe just something to make Jin's aware of. Is I'm aware that we've gotten a couple of complaints about early trash pickup. So we would appreciate it if you could pass along to your contractor when trash is supposed to be picked up. So.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, I contact the trash company, and I call to then they know don't come in the early 7 o'clock p.m. bottle the label. Yeah, so they promise yes, don't come in the 7 o'clock in the morning again. And I say if you do that again, I will change to company.
Okay.
She's a tough cookie.
Well, just know that we're getting calls about it too, so,
Yes.
you know, hopefully it doesn't happen again, but if it does, then.
Yeah, we want to the very good relation to the labor, you know.
Yeah.
We do the business, yeah. We want to, you know, something respond to bad to the community. Yeah. So,
be a good neighbor.
Right. Yes, yeah, exactly. All right, thank you.
Okay, any questions? This is not a public hearing, but I'll take public comment if anyone wishes to comment on this, and I see none. So I will move that we approve the application of Jin Brookline, Inc., doing business as Jin's Fine Asian Cuisine and Sushi Bar, holder of a 7-day all kinds alcoholic beverage common victualers license at 329 Harvard Street, J. Way, attorney, for a change of beneficial interest, removing Zong Rong Wang and Zi Guo Zhang as shareholders. Hope I didn't do too bad with the pronunciation. All those in favor, please say aye. Select person Franco.
Aye.
Select person Heller. Aye. Select person Green. Aye. Select person Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we're moving on to a public hearing on the application New England Treatment Access, more commonly known as NETA, at 160 Washington Street, for a this is a recreational marijuana retailer license, and NETA has been operating as a medical marijuana dispensary at that address since February 2016. And I'll just note that this is the first public hearing on a license. This is the last phase of a long and winding road that starts here and ends here, with stops at the State Cannabis Control Commission, the Planning Board, the Zoning Board of Appeals, various departments in between, and the departments and the boards have put you through the ringer, and we're going to do the same. So, Ms. Gilbert, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here this evening on behalf of NETA. Jennifer DePazzo Gilbert. This is an application to co-locate an adult-use marijuana retail storefront with the existing medical dispensary. As you've indicated, this has been a long process. I'd like to go over the history a little bit so that everybody's up to speed on where we've been and where we are right now in the process. But before I do that, let me introduce the team from NETA that are here with me this evening. I have Amanda Rosatano, who is the Director of Operational Compliance, Eric Holler, who is the Dispensary Manager, Brian Rodriguez, and Chelsea Akencier, Operations Specialists, are here with me this evening, as well as Rick Bryant from Stantec, the traffic consultant who worked on all of the traffic reports for NETA. So back in February 2016 is when NETA opened its doors as a medical dispensary at 160 Washington Street, the old bank on the corner of Route 9. You're very familiar with the location. That building is a beautiful building. The Preservation Commission and staff were thrilled that NETA was able to restore it. It's still beautiful on the inside and outside and was restored, and none of the changes that they anticipate to open as recreational will affect the historical value and integrity of the building. After 2016, then came 2017, the recreational statute was put into place and signed by the governor. And following that, in April of 2018, NETA applied to the Cannabis Control Commission for a recreational license and a co-location with the medical dispensary. In July of 2018, the state granted NETA the provisional license, and then from July through September, we really started the departmental review process. Of course, in May of 2018, the town meeting passed both the general bylaw and the zoning bylaws to allow this use to proceed under very specific operational regulations and requirements. And those zoning bylaws and the general bylaws were created really by the licensing committee, and NETA was involved and went to dozens of their meetings to both assist and listen and be part of that process. So it's been over 2 years now. And over the summer, we were very, very busy meeting with the health department officials, the Brookline Police Department folks, people from DPW and fire, to both provide them with additional information. There were maybe a dozen tours of the facility for planning and building staff. Every single department has toured the building, asked for additional information. There were meetings upon meetings to ensure that every department was satisfied with the operations that were in existence and that were proposed. All of the numerous meetings resulted in reports and recommendations that you have before you from the various departments. And to summarize, many categories were analyzed by the police department. And of those categories, you'll see in the police department report that the police have determined that NETA has met and exceeded the requirements of both the Brookline bylaw and the state regulations with respect to their security plan, prevention of product diversion, storage of marijuana, transportation of marijuana, inventory procedures, and dispensing procedures. The police did make various recommendations for conditions, which NETA has either completed already or agreed to be part of their conditions for the license. And they include provision of police details for the opening during peak opening times, additional staff both outside and inside the facility, additional point of sale or registers. Those are going to be doubled from 13 to approximately 26. There is a scanner ID system in place for IDs, which was checked and verified by Lieutenant Raskin. And IDs are checked both prior to entry and at point of sale twice. There will be online advance ordering through an app, which also helps with the efficiency of processing the line. There will be 4 lines within the facility. There'll be a separate medical line. There'll be a separate medical express line. Then there'll be an adult use line and adult use express line. And Dr. Jett had asked for a demonstration of how the app works and also how underage folks will be prevented from accessing the facility, and so that was done with the health department to their satisfaction. Those apps and online ordering has actually decreased the time of a customer coming into the facility down to between 5 and 7 minutes, which helps with processing. So this application also does ask for extended hours. The original ask was from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week. The departments, both DPW, Transportation, Traffic, Police, and the Police Department did not agree with the 8 a.m. start, and they recommended a 9 a.m. start. The traffic consultant reviewed the traffic reports and agreed and had a meeting with Todd Corain and Peter Ditto on the traffic impact, and he can discuss that with you if you have specific questions on that. In addition, the Health Department wanted to go over crowd control with the Police Department, and we met with them several times, as well as with DPW, and have a crowd control plan now in place that was vetted by the police, health, and DPW. And some of the things that are going to assist with the anticipated crowd during the peak opening. Now, this will not be the first facility for adult use that will open. Netta has a facility in Northampton that is anticipated to open within the next week or two, and so that will be the first one. We don't know whether Brookline will be second. I think what the CCC is anticipating is sort of rolling applications. They don't want one or two to be open, so those will be rolling licenses will be issued. But in any event, some of the crowd control measures that are going to be put in place, like I said, the online ordering with the app for both medical and adult use, doubling of point of sales registers, increasing staff, increase of police details. There are 4 parking lots available for Netta, which is incredible for any business in Brookline. There are 52 spaces available. The 4 lots, 2 are dedicated solely to employees. At Village Way, there is a lot available for 12 spaces for employees only. Across the street at the old Dunkin' Donuts site, in between Lamora and that new site that's being developed, is another parking lot for 12 employee spaces only. Then right adjacent to the Brookline Bank, that is for customers only, and that's where the police detail stands and directs both pedestrian and vehicular traffic every day. There are 13 spaces there. And then there are 15 spaces down at the Homewood Suites that are available to Netta customers as well. So 52 spaces in total available. There is a robust TDM plan which exceeds town standards, which will be approved and was also a condition of the special permit. So those are some of the things on crowd control. I just also want to note that in addition to the public meetings and the tours and the departmental meetings that we had, we also went through a planning board public hearing, and the planning board approved and recommended approval to the zoning board. Then the zoning board had a site visit on October 17th, took them through the facility, and then they held their public hearing on October 25th and approved the special permit with conditions. With respect to the conditions for the board's license, I have drafted proposed conditions based on what was in the medical license, as well as the conditions that are in the special permit, and the conditions that are in the host community agreement. I've taken those and I've added in all the departmental recommendations as conditions as well, and I intend to share those with town council tomorrow morning, incorporating any feedback that we get from the board this evening. So that's where we are. You have the application in front of you. The zoning board's decision does make certain findings, that the location is appropriate, that it complies with all of the zoning requirements, that it meets or exceeds all of the operational standards set forth in the zoning bylaw, and that Netta has sufficiently shown that it can meet all of the operational and regulatory requirements in the zoning bylaw and the state standards. So we're here for questions. Anything you want to discuss this evening? We know we'll be back as the chairman indicated.
Okay. Yeah.
Just to your point of the extra spaces at Homewood Suites, how would a customer potentially know about those spaces?
So the way that will work is when the other lot is full, that's adjacent to the site, we went over a plan with the police department of how that would work. There'll be a ticket given to the vehicle by the parking attendant that's always there for NETA.
So they'll pull into the first lot?
They'll pull up, there'll be a sign. The police recommended putting up a sign that says lot full. They'll be handed a ticket. They'll go down to the Homewood Suites. That ticket will get them into the lot, and then they can walk down, get their merchandise, walk back, and hand the ticket back in. And so that's how that would work.
I'll note, just for the public's information, there is an extensive police department report which is up on our website, which has a whole bunch of recommendations which NETA has accepted.
Yes, and some have already been completed. For example, the police department recommended that NETA repair the town's sidewalk because it was all cracked in front of the bank, and that's already been done. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. They're recommending a concave mirror be installed at the parking lot?
Yes, some additional lighting, a restriping of the parking lot, a concave mirror to help with traffic, and all those items will be done. If they aren't already done, we will add them as a condition to the license.
You mentioned before that in order to access the Homewood Suites parking spaces, a customer would pull up, and I'm assuming that they're going to be double parking or something of that nature right in front and while they get their ticket from the police officers. So are they going to be impeding traffic when they're getting their ticket? Where are they going to go physically with their car while they're getting the ticket?
Sure, there won't be any double parking, and the police officer won't be handing the ticket. A NETA will have an assigned parking attendant, and there'll be a spot to pull over where there's curb parking. When the lot is full, they'll pull over, the parking attendant will hand them the ticket, and then they will go at the direction of the officer down and park at the Homewood Suites. So that's how that would work.
So I'm still focused on the traffic and the parking a little bit because I am concerned about it. And there was a suggestion in here. I'm not sure I can put, it's a pretty big packet, and I don't know if I can put my finger on it exactly, but apparently, I guess it's on page 13.66 of our packet. With the police department notes that it's rare that it occurs, but apparently the police details stop the traffic so that the people can exit the parking, and then that causes some sort of a backup. So I'm curious, I mean, we had some anecdotal evidence that is what's happening and that it's occurring rarely, but I'm concerned that we should have better tracking of that issue.
Sure, and so there is a reporting requirement at 3 months and 15 months that's part of the traffic management plan, but I'd like to have Amanda maybe speak to how it actually happens in practice because she's there every day.
Good evening. Amanda Rositano, Director of Compliance for NETA. Actually, Lieutenant Raskin spoke to this issue at the ZBA just a couple weeks ago, and specifically relating to your question of are they stopping traffic on Route 9 to let cars out. What he explained is they really have, because these police details are there every day, they've sort of developed a system in which they're waiting for that intersection light to be red before they're letting people out of the parking lot if there's oncoming traffic. So they've all kind of figured it out by now that, you know, as opposed to stopping traffic on Route 9 to let people out, they're waiting, they're queuing people up in the parking lot and not letting them out of the parking lot until the light has turned red or until there's a clearing to let
Well,
people out.
I understand that they're not doing it when the light is red and traffic is flowing from east to west on Boylston Street. But what about when that light is red, people who are traveling on what's then Washington Street from north to south, who are making that turn onto Boylston, what do? Do they get stopped?
So again, my understanding of how the police details are managing this is they're allowing traffic out when there's no traffic coming in. And again, there's a light at that intersection, both at Washington Street and on Route 9 there, that eventually turns red. So there really is, I think we would be disingenuous to say there's never a time where cars are stopped on Route 9, but I think it is very rare that they're actually stopping traffic to let people out. And in terms of the issuance of the ticket to go to the Homewood Suites, it's a very, very fast transaction. The person doesn't even need to leave their car. They're just being handed a ticket and waved on. Similarly, if the lot was closed, they would pull up to try to enter the lot and be waved on. At this point,
So are the spots those ones at the top of the lot that
yes,
those couple of spaces right there? So in fact, people are pulling in.
No, I'm sorry. No, they're not actually pulling into the parking lot. They're just pulling up to the entrance, pulling over to the entrance of the parking lot, as we've discussed with the police, to be issued that ticket. The ticket itself has instructions on it. We also have on our website and on a pamphlet, like a traveling to Netta pamphlet, instructions on how to use that lot. So we're trying to inform people as much as we can beforehand as to what to do. Once they get that ticket, they're coming right up to the hotel and they're pulling into the valet area, being issued a key to the parking garage that gets dropped on the way out. So it's the amount of time that they're actually stopped on Route 9 is a split second.
Do you have any statistics on the percentage of people who come by public transit versus cars, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, we did do that. That was a request, I can't remember exactly when, but for one of these meetings, and it was more than half of our customers are coming by means other than a vehicle.
Okay.
And we do expect that number to increase now that we won't specifically be serving patients. I think a lot of our patients have mobility issues, so it's harder to travel by public transit. Of course, many of them do, but we think there's going to be more opportunity for people to take the T in for our adult use clients.
How much traffic, this is probably more for the consultant, but how much traffic is calculated to be induced with the addition of retail?
Rick Bryant with Stantec, and we've looked at data from other states where they've gone from medical only to combination, and looking at those sites, we see that the amount of traffic roughly doubles. And part of what happened under the original permit, and you mentioned anecdotal data about what's happening, people turning in and out. There was prior permit put conditions on the project that we go out and monitor what's happening. So we studied traffic before they built it, and we were out there twice afterwards counting everything, including how long people have to wait to get in. So we have good data from this site in Brookline to know how much traffic it's generating. And right now it's at peak, the busiest hour is about 30 vehicle trips, which is 16 vehicles arriving, 16 vehicles leaving. So that number we would expect to double. And compared to what's going through the intersection that's there at Washington Street, that's almost 3,000 cars, over 3,000 cars an hour in the afternoon peak. So we're less than 1% of what's happening there. So
you're talking about 30, 16 each way,
yeah,
or 32, in an hour?
In an hour, the busiest hour, yeah.
So from 5 to 6?
Probably more like 4:30 to 5:30 is when it's busier. but in that time slot, that window of commuter peak.
And 3,000 cars are going past in that same hour?
That big intersection there right
Okay.
now, that's been counted as well. And there's roughly 3,000 vehicles come through that intersection during the morning rush hour.
Okay, so but what times are those?
That is 8 to 9 a.m. And the afternoon rush hour, that number jumps up to almost 3,900
In an hour?
in an hour, yeah. So a lot of lanes, a lot of approaches, a lot of cars get through there. So yeah, so the 16, customers that drive to the site isn't a big number relative to what's out there.
The other places that had gone from medical to retail that you were looking to kind of get a guide, did any of these places have as robust transit connections, urban setting?
I don't know the specifics of that. Again, our assumption is that the mode split, as we call it, doesn't change, and Amanda's correct that when we compared, she's counting transactions, they get the registers, so they're knowing how many customers are coming in and out an hour. We're out there with video cameras actually counting cars, so we can compare number of cars to number of transactions. When we do that comparison, we are running at about 55% of the people that come are not arriving by automobile.
Interesting. Okay.
So I want to take us away from traffic, so I don't know if Selectperson Heller has another question on that. I don't want to break up thematic lines of questioning here.
No, I think that I'd still like to make sure that we don't have backups around the corner. I understand backups this way are not happening because the police are not allowing the cars to come out, but I want to make sure that there's no, because that is a murderous corner. And, there's nothing going to be more annoying to people, especially when they're driving around that corner, to have to stop and wait for cars to come out.
That same concern was anticipated the first time through, and I mentioned the monitoring program. The monitoring that we do is dictated by the travel demand management plan that we approved, that your board's approved, and that plan says that we can't block Route 9 for more than 5% of the peak hour. So when we go out and do this monitoring, one of the things we're doing is, again, we have a camera there set up, and we watch to see how often a police officer comes out and stops traffic on Route 9. And if they're doing that so frequently that it's happening more than 5% of the time, these folks are in trouble and need to come up with a new plan. So that's already required of this project, that we not impede things. Again, is it going to happen on occasion? Of course. So we set a limit of 5% is allowable. If we go above that, we have to tweak it to make it work better.
So, Ms. Gilbert alluded to this a little bit, but one of the things that's of interest to me is access into the facility. And I think it's a little bit complex because you've got two separate populations here that have sort of two separate rules that they're abiding by. So I'm sorry to make you go through this again, but can you just walk me through how this is going to work?
Absolutely. I'm going to have Amanda walk you through it. It is complex, and it is required to separate the medical from the adult use.
I'm actually going to argue that it's not that complex.
We'll see.
So we will have a door person during all hours of operation. When anyone comes to the door to try to enter NETA, they'll be asked to present an ID showing that they're over 21 years of age. Whether they're a patient or an adult use consumer, all they need to do is show that they're 21 to enter the facility. There will be separate lines outside for patients and adult use consumers. The patient line will remain where it goes now, right down the driveway a little bit, and then the adult use line is intended to go the other way around the facility. When you get to that person, we're going to ask you for your ID. They're going to scan your ID with the ID scanner to ensure that it's a valid ID. Only then will you be let into the facility. If you're a patient and you're over 21, you're going to identify yourself as a patient over 21, or you're going to identify yourself as a patient when you come in by going to the patient-only line. If you wish. You can, if you're a patient, go into the adult use line as long as you're 21 years old. Really where it gets tricky is if, because the medical patient program exists, remains, we do have patients who are under 21. So the way that that will work is when an under 21 patient, who's, by the way, required to have a parental caregiver with them, who's also registered with the state, when they come to the door, and they can't present an ID that they're 21 years of age, we're going to require, just like we do now, that they present their medical card and a valid ID. At that point in time, before they enter the facility, they'll be checked against the live state tracking system to confirm that they are indeed a valid patient with a valid certification and registration. As long as they are valid in the system, we can let them enter. Our process for doing that is going to be the door person will have a two-way radio that connects them to our security staff and our management staff inside. We're just going to radio to let them know that there is an under 21 patient entering the facility, and that patient is directed to the medical-only line. Now, you actually have more access in the medical line, so preventing them from going into the adult use line is, they have access to the same products in the medical line. In fact, they have access to more because they're patients. There's more restrictions on the adult use side. But nonetheless, we will have, sort of eyes on that patient who's in the facility with their caregiver just to make sure that they're, coming in, purchasing their medicine, exiting the facility. It's under 1% of our patients that we're talking about needing to verify like this, being under 21. Does that?
Yeah, I guess I sort of understand the way it's going to work. It sounds like, and I'm envisioning sort of the airport here, where there seems to be a million different lines for different things. How long do you anticipate some of those queues being at peak times of utilization or visitation?
Within the facility?
Or on the sidewalk?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that I have the answer to that. I'd be kind of shooting from the cuff.
What were the queues like in the beginning?
So in the beginning, we did have long lines inside, not as much outside. Right now, we sometimes have a lineup outside of the facility, but it's usually before we open. So it's just people waiting to get in first. When we initially opened, we did have long lines inside, and part of that had to do with us just not having our systems really locked in yet. We rarely have long lines in the facility now. I think the longest a patient really is ever in the facility is under 15 minutes. In terms of all of the different lines, once you're in the facility, you could kind of see, and we welcome you guys to come in for a tour and see how it looks inside, that there's very clear direction as to where to go. While there's 4 lines, the express area is one area with 2 separate lines. So with clear signage, lots of staff, that's part of our business model, is that we have a lot of staff to deal with contingencies, right? We have a lot of staff dealing with customers, but also staff on the floor if a patient needs additional help. Staff, we have a greeter who's telling people, where to go. We have roamers, we call them roamers, that walk the floor and help guide people. We're going to have people outside helping to manage the line in addition to the 2 police details. We have consultation rooms available for both patients and adult use consumers. Education is everything for us, so we want to make sure that even our adult use consumers have access to private consultations if they so choose.
Yeah. Got a couple more questions. One, first of all, the area of health. I don't know whether you, as I understand it, have products in all kinds of, things to smoke and things to inhale and things to eat and things to, put on your skin and whatever. And I'm just wondering, I remember when Dr. Balsam was here, that one of the things that he talked about in terms of marijuana smoking is that, smoking of any kind is not really good for your lungs. And I'm wondering whether you give patients any warning about that? Are there medical journal articles that you rely on to try to limit the amount of inhalation of this stuff?
So, I'll say that the scientific data on this is mixed as it relates to cannabis. What we do is we offer our patients a broad variety of products. People are really moving more and more away from, combustible cannabis and towards other, what we call infused products. We have over 160 different products, many of which are not combustible products. We're not in the business of discouraging people from making their own personal choices, and we do have to provide access to the types of products that people want. Some people are purists and they want the flower, and that's their choice. So we do have that available to patients, but we have robust education materials that go into all of these topics around safe consumption, safe dosing, low and slow, meaning starting with the lowest possible dose and only increasing in very small intervals to make sure that you're consuming safely.
Have you limited the quantities of material that you will provide? Let's talk first about patients at any one time.
I'm sorry, can you...
Have you limited the quantity, in other words...
How much someone can purchase?
Yes.
Yes. So first of all, it's limited by state regulation. So adult use consumers cannot purchase more than an ounce of cannabis. Patients are limited differently. They have a larger allotment, and that's over a 60-day period that allotment, and that's tracked in the live state tracking system that I discussed. There's also limits on the dosing of any individual product. No more than a 5 milligram serving size, no more than 20 servings in any given package. For an edible product, for example, each individual serving needs to be imprinted with the dose. So if I'm selling you a chocolate bar, every piece of that chocolate bar will say 5 milligrams contains THC. And that's written right into the regulations. So everything is very, very clearly dosed, very clearly labeled, and then those doses are limited in not only how much someone can buy, but how much any one product can contain.
Okay, well, it's sort of leading me to my question about diversion. And I did read in the materials that, you have locked materials and storerooms and security to prevent people from coming in and getting access to the stuff. But how do you prevent adult use from walking in the door, buying a certain amount, walking out the door and giving it to, or selling it to, reselling it?
I mean, I think that, we do everything that we can to educate people, again, around safe use, safe consumption, safe storage, what the laws are in Massachusetts around diverting to minors. Once they leave our facility, it's really out of our hands. That's the police. That's the people who are purchasing. It does sort of fall on their responsibility, just like if they were going to go to a liquor store and make a purchase, to then not divert that product. But we can, what we can do is make sure that it doesn't happen within our facility, that we don't allow access to anyone who's under 21, and that we have our security protocols in place, and again, education, which we think is really important. If people don't know what the penalties are for diverting, then they might be more inclined, but if they do know, which we tell them.
Have you provided them, or will you provide them with some written materials which describe the penalties? And I suppose the other thing you could do is have them sign a statement saying that they're not going to divert the product to someone under 21.
Yeah, we do provide written materials. All of our patients sign those written statements. In terms of our adult use consumers, we really can't collect identifying data on those individuals. So it gets a little bit more tricky to have them sign an attestation.
Yeah,
Yeah, along those same lines, the diversion's probably going to largely end up among high school students. And, the high school does take student surveys of drug usage and other things. Have you talked to the high school in regards to, any, I guess with medical marijuana, it would be less than with recreational marijuana, and you haven't started recreation yet, but have you reached out to them to sort of get a sense of how significant the problem is?
Yeah. So our director of patient education, Andy Epstein, who is also a Brookline resident here, she's worked really closely with the health department and the substance abuse prevention group over at the high school, trying to create some materials and some programming with the help of NETA, specifically on that topic. So yes, we absolutely have, and we continue to work really closely with the health department.
It'd be helpful if some of that could be shared with the board, because this issue of diversion comes up in connection with recreational marijuana in various locations. And it's always good to have facts as opposed to sort of speculation as to the problem.
So Andy Epstein, who is a Brookline resident and one of NETA's educational folks who's been working with the health department and the group at the high school, she's going to be here for the next hearing, so we could have her speak to that.
Let's shift gears into hours of operation. The application is for 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. and that seems like a long time to me. If we're looking at package stores as kind of a similar regulatory model, looking at how package stores open around town, some open as early as 8, but the ones that have licenses for 8 tend to be like grocery stores or convenience stores that have like a beer and wine department, such as Kirkman's or Putterham Market. But most package stores will open 10 a.m., 11 a.m., noon, and especially at this intersection. I know the original application was for 8 o'clock, and then the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Planning Department and Police Department pushed back to 9 o'clock to kind of avoid the rush hour.
Yeah, so the reason for the extended hours was also to assist in lowering the queuing. That has proven, and I know in Northampton they have an 8 a.m., 8 to 10 start time, and those extended hours actually lessen the queuing on the sidewalk. So that was one of the intentions. Also, comparing it to both package store hours as well as pharmacies, which are also open, 9 a.m. to 10 p.m., most of them, not all. But that was what we were looking at.
Yeah. If you're comparing it to pharmacies, while you were operating as a medical dispensary only, you were open from 10 to 7, 6 days a week, and 12 to 5 on Sunday. And how were those hours working out for you?
So those hours worked fine. I mean, we did seek to expand our hours in Northampton while we were still a medical facility, mostly to provide more access to patients, because queuing really wasn't a significant issue in Northampton. It certainly helped with queuing on those busy days by spreading it out over a broader period of time. But those early hours are the least frequently attended hours. But they are, there were some requests from a lot of our patients to be able to come in on their way to work to pick up their medication. We also liked the idea of expanding the hours, so we went ahead and did that. And what we did see is, we didn't actually see an increase in volume. We just saw that volume sort of spread out over those hours.
Yeah.
I guess, I mean, the queuing problem, it seems to me it's something that's particularly an issue in the morning. I mean, I'm a little uncomfortable with the 9 to 10 hours in terms of the newness of recreational marijuana. We don't really know a lot about how it's going to, what the response is going to be, issues that may come up that we can't think of right now. I guess, my inclination would be to, reduce the hours down to what the medical marijuana hours are, just for a short period of time, so that we can really get a sense of what the consequences are, or how it's going to work.
So if
That's my idea.
that would significantly increase the queuing on the public sidewalk and have a probably quite a dramatic effect on revenues as well.
So I'm going to endorse sort of a slow approach here. And looking at some of the package store license hours that we have, and particularly in this general area, it seems like maintaining the opening time of 10 a.m. Makes a lot of sense. I am sympathetic to the queuing argument that's being made, and don't have a problem extending hours Monday through Saturday into the evening with some reasonableness injected. So I would say, just to throw some numbers out there, an actual proposal, Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. To 8 p.m. And then on Sunday, I would say 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. That's a stake in the ground. I'm curious to know what reaction is.
Well, why don't we get some reaction from the public?
Let me just say one thing. I think the Sunday hours go back to the blue laws, and I don't think are appropriate. I'll just throw that out.
Okay.
So this is a public hearing that we've touched on a lot of topics, kind of all aspects of the operation. And if there are any members of the public who wish to comment, I'd be especially interested. I'd be interested in hearing any of your thoughts, but I'd be real interested in hearing thoughts on hours of operation. Come on up.
Hi, it's Beth Cates. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 9, 105 Center Street. I don't know if I'm supposed to give my address or not. I am concerned about the hours. I think that they're a little excessive. But if I might make a suggestion, you might want to have medicinal customers only hours that, maybe give them time, like if you have a lot of customers that want to come in earlier in the morning before work, so make it only for medicinal customers earlier. And, that might sort of help dissipate things a little bit. But I am concerned about the early hours and the late hours, and understand the queuing issues and everything. But I do think that the hours are kind of long. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Frawley?
Regina Frawley, Precinct 16. I won't comment on the hours, but I will comment on vaping for teenagers at the high school. I think that you have to do some serious, and you should take the responsibility, not them, to find out just how widespread the vaping is at the high school. I learned about it this summer. I kept finding funny little things I thought were the caps of pens, and I was told by the staff, no, that's vaping. So now that, and if you do the studies that are already happening in other states, when recreational marijuana is legalized, there is a higher rate of vaping marijuana in the schools and everywhere. So I would appreciate if you looked into it yourself, ordered the staff to take a look at the high school and vaping. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wish? Sure, come on up.
I'm Matt Hyatt. I live at 87 Walnut Street, so I live at the house that goes through the block. So the back of my house is next to the lot that they used to use for staff. So I just took some notes, and I appreciate having the open hearings. You mentioned that lot was available. It hasn't been used. It's been blocked off. Are you going to reopen that? I know it's not owned by Netta. It's owned by somebody else, and it's leased. I'm curious how that's going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, so we signed a reinstatement agreement, and that will be open. It was effective November 1st.
Okay.
Which is great, and I had no problem when you were using that for staff. I'd love to know if there's a lever within that agreement for maintenance of that lot, either by Netta or by the owner, because right now it's a mess, and there are rubber tires. There still are. So it's littered, and it's not been maintained since the bank moved away and gave up ownership of that. So I would like to see the maintenance of that lot be a requirement of the people who are using it or the landlord through contract. A couple of things that I've noted. I saw on the diagram in the police report the queue for the adult recreation use is in some ways sort of anticipated to potentially go around the building. I do see that the line gets pretty long before opening on weekends in particular when I'm home. I'm not usually here when it opens on a weekday. But, for example, if you were going to open at 9, that queue, my guess is that queue is going to be quite extensive between sort of 8:30 and 9 o'clock as people are arriving early for a 9 o'clock opening. So if the opening were to stay at 9 o'clock, that's when that queue is going to basically, I think, obstruct the width of the sidewalk. It is a narrow sidewalk, but I walk my dog, I get a coffee every morning. A lot of families with strollers getting their kids to the daycare, so it's a tough time of day to restrict the width of the use of that sidewalk to one way. So if you have a queue of people on one side of the sidewalk and you have half the sidewalk remaining for traffic for anybody else who's passing, two-way traffic, parents coming and going, people coming and going. So the idea of delaying it a little later after the daycare flow is gone and the school kids with their parents is gone might help in terms of the impact of that queue on neighbors using that.
So have you seen the queue during the week? Or
no, I only can see it because I'm at work. So right. on Saturdays and Sundays, it's quite long. When Dunkin' Donuts used to be open, I would get my coffee and I sit on the back porch in the summertime and watch, and it can be 20 people on the Medical side now. So I can only imagine it might be double that before opening once you have both. And if you've got 40 people, 20 on the medicinal side going down, that's not a problem, but 40 people around the building, that's a lot, and it will impact the use of that sidewalk. And there's some talk in the police report about using stanchions. They have a fairly wide bulbous base that holds the upright because we're not going to be slotting things into the concrete, so that also reduces the width for strollers. Just want to make sure we're not creating an issue for the people who are not in line who need to use that sidewalk. One thought, and you sort of hit on this, Nancy, that, and I see this when I come home mostly, and you're right that the police officer is very good about waiting for the light cycle to change, and there is a crossing walk at the same time that the people coming down Washington would turn. So those cars wait for the pedestrians pretty much every light cycle. So it's not as if that's going to necessarily impede them. But I do see when the parking lot's full and people pull over to ask, what should I do? And that is a fairly quick transaction, but they do live park. They do stop one lane of traffic, and it might be possible to eliminate parking from the curb cut at Netta all the way to the intersection and kind of stripe that as no parking, which will allow people to pull over and talk to the parking attendant without obstructing the two lanes of the highway. And I think it's only 2 or maybe 3 spaces. And if that doesn't work, some creation of a pullover space within the shoulder of the road, I think, would help alleviate that, because it does happen, and it would be expected to happen. People might be coming for the first time, they don't know where to go. I don't know that this is within town jurisdiction. I think it's Mass DOT, but there's not great signage on my side of Route 9 in terms of where and how you can park. So with the lot being blocked by the big concrete blocks and with the fenced-off Dunkin' Donuts site, which I know was all going to change in the next year, there's sort of no signage about how to park. And so typically cars are parking end to end to end, and probably twice a week there's a car that's halfway blocking my driveway because they're trying to squeeze in, and I get it, and I'm not, I can still squeeze out if I need to. But if there's a way to make sure that the state highway folks know that they need to put some parking signs up that let people know how to use that side of the street. There's no signs now. It's being used for parking by default, but it was never intended to be parking. It's basically all curb cut at the lot, and it sounds like that'll go back to being all curb cut at the lot. And I know for a period of time when the new building's under construction, that's going to be construction fencing, so cars will continue to park there. At the end of all of that, it would be nice to have permanent signage that explains for how long and what use parking on that side could be.
Do we have jurisdiction over parking signage on Route 9?
I don't believe so.
Really?
Route 9 is a state road.
Yeah. Yes, I don't know that you do.
Yeah.
If there's a way, I know that with the developer, I think it's Kenwood, who's doing that property, they're actually extending the sidewalk into their site, and I know that that part of the sidewalk is not state highway, that's their right of way. I don't know if we can get them to install signs, or if the town can install signs on that piece of property. Just something to think about. It's not a huge issue now, but it is confusing people.
Mm-hmm.
Can I park here, can't I park here, and there's no signage at all.
Yeah, that makes sense.
One thing I know that Stantec has set up their own cameras, and I don't know that this is technically how you can use it, but there is a camera at the intersection. It's a public safety camera. It's attached to the police department, the fire department building. So at any point, I imagine that there is tape that you could watch back to kind of see what the traffic pattern is, how often traffic is stopped, what happens at the intersection when the lights change. It's a very busy intersection. I'm not saying you could learn anything, but there is video evidence of what's happening there, how often traffic is stopped by someone who can't turn in. So that exists, and I don't know whether or not you can use that or if that's a privacy issue, but something possible. And then last thing, I don't know what the conditions are that you could place on this, but this is all brand new, and I'm not saying it won't work, but if it doesn't work, if we end up with 3 times as many vehicles coming rather than double, is there a point in time where the number of parking spaces made available has to increase, and do you have leverage in the conditional approval that says at 6 months, if it turns out that we were way off in how many visits and we need more than 52 spaces, that you could require that they find additional parking. Half of the 52, I think, is staff, which makes sense. You're doubling staff. They all need a place to park, and they can walk a little further. But between the 12 spaces, I think it's 12, at Netta and the ones further down at Homewood Suites, there's not a lot of other choices except for the on-street, and that's obviously limited as well. So if there is at some point a way to sort of say, if we need more, find the next lot available. And I know that the Dunkin' Donuts further down, there's a huge section of their lot that's almost never used. So I think there is other opportunity further down. It's a little bit of a walk, but there are ways to do it if that can be thought of as something that you revisit.
I guess question, I know we're anticipating, as we did with the medical, that we would have a monitoring requirement. So Mr. Hyatt raises the point, okay, we have the monitoring requirement, and the monitoring shows there's a problem. What do we do about it? So.
My last thing, I have a 15-year-old at the high school, and all I can say is when I told him I was coming tonight, he's like, yes! I'm not saying it's good or bad, but the high school kids are very aware that this is happening.
I wanted to ask him a question.
Yeah, so I was just going to mention the monitoring at 3-month and 15-month, and also it's an annual license.
Right.
So you reconsider it every year, all of the issues, and obviously if police or the transportation department or fire came to you in the midst of it, you could bring us back in for a hearing.
Could I ask a question about the queuing and the problems with, right now you open at 10, correct? And apparently you have some people showing up before 10 to get in line.
Right.
And how many, do you have you counted how many people show up and what time they're coming?
Well, I think Amanda answered that. There could be, 5, 10, maybe more on the weekends that arrive right before opening to pick up their medicine. Do you count it?
No, I'd say on weekdays, there's usually a few people lining up outside the door. Usually they're kind of congregating, talking to each other, waiting for the doors to open. And on Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays, it's usually a dozen, yeah, maybe 15 people that try to get there before everybody else and just get in first. So it's not dramatic.
So that, in fact, a 10 o'clock opening makes a little more sense than even a 9 o'clock, because at 9 o'clock they're going to start queuing up at 8:30, and that's going to pose additional issues with traffic and pedestrian activity, which is higher at that time than it is in the later time.
I don't necessarily agree with that, because again, the extended hours has shown that the volume spreads out. So that includes the volume of folks showing up to get their products, whether it be adult or medical. So I'm not sure that works out that way.
But the later hours can absorb the volume a little better than the early hours.
Later hours, you mean on the tail end, the 10 p.m.?
Well, no, I mean 10 to 11 a.m. or 10 to 12 a.m. I mean, there's less.
But those are the hours now. It's 10 a.m.
What I'm saying is that you're saying that the volume would spread out over the entire period, and I'm saying that that's true, but 10 to 12 is more able to absorb that additional volume because less congestion than at the rush hour period.
I guess if everybody shows up at the same time, that would be true, but I'm not certain that would work out that way.
Beth Cates again. I guess one thing that hasn't really been brought up at all at this meeting is that right now, NETA is probably going to be one of the first facilities to open for adult use in Boston, in the Boston area. And we're talking about volumes that might change dramatically should other facilities open on Beacon Street and Commonwealth Ave, as are in process right now, as well as in Boston. So your business is going to be impacted by other facilities opening. So the volumes that we're talking about right now may be just initial, because it'll be spread out over lots of facilities, throughout the metro area. So it's kind of hard to say what's going to happen, what's not going to happen, and it will change over time.
Right. That's true.
So just a couple of comments. NETA Brookline will not be first. We anticipate being fourth, maybe fifth.
In Boston? Inside 128?
There'll be at least two.
So there are other final licenses that have been granted in Cambridge, I believe. No, there'll be at least three dispensaries opening before NETA, not necessarily in Boston, but we won't be first, period.
Right, but you're going to be first or among the first inside 128.
Among the first.
And you're certainly among the first adjacent to a T station.
Sure.
Right. You're going to open Northampton first, and Northampton, I don't think it's the same set of customers.
Rick actually has some data in regards to when we expanded our hours in Northampton and how that sort of reshaped.
Out of curiosity, what are your hours? What are your intended hours when you open recreational in Northampton?
8 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Okay.
Okay. What is it? 8 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Yeah. Mr. Bryant? Yeah.
Did you want to hear about the data on the peak times in Northampton?
Sure.
Yeah, NETA shared with us their Northampton experience when they expanded the hours, and the numbers show this was averaged over a 3-month period, but the first hour of the day, 10 to 11, which was their original opening, they were doing 43 transactions in that hour. When they shifted the opening time to 8 a.m., that number 43 dropped to 27. In the earlier hours that they picked up, 8 to 9 a.m. and 9 to 10 a.m., they're doing 12 transactions in the first hour, 17 transactions in the second hour. So it really knocked the peak down. In the earlier hours, had much smaller numbers than the 10 to 11.
So to put that in perspective, currently from 10 to 11 now, how does 43 transactions compare in Brookline? Are you doing double that?
No, it's very similar. The numbers are similar.
Okay.
By volume or by the times when peak, the peak operations?
Both.
Both.
But let me just ask this question. So, assuming you have 40 customers between 10 and 11, and if you open by 8, you're going to reduce that to, you're going to have 25 between 8 and 9. But that's 25 more people who are driving or, becoming pedestrians or in the area looking for parking spaces, et cetera, to come to the facility during an hour when the area is already very, very busy. So by congregating them between 10 and 11...
But 8 o'clock is not on the table.
I know, but I'm just pointing out, they had originally asked for that, and I'm just pointing out to them that, and then with the additional queuing that's happening, if you open at 9, you're still having a lot of those people showing up at 8:30 and et cetera. So, I get extending it at the end of the day, but I think in the beginning of the day, it's more problematic in terms of traffic and where people are going, and, I understand people would like to be able to access it before work, but they can also access it after work, or Saturdays and Sundays.
Anyone else from the public wish to speak? Okay, so I'm going to close the public hearing.
One thing, maybe I'm missing something here, but for recreational marijuana, do we want to give people the convenience of picking up their marijuana before work? Just throw that out.
I mean,
medical marijuana, of course.
Look, I think that we would be okay with the 10 o'clock start. It seems reasonable, but we would want the 10 o'clock close to keep that volume down and to keep revenues up and to spread out the volume. Because it would seem arbitrary to close before that if package stores are open that late, pharmacies, etc. So, just a thought.
Well, we're going to
Yeah, we're not voting tonight.
We will be presenting a proposed license with conditions before your next meeting. So I know that Netta indicated that they're helping to draft such, but you'll have the proposed conditions when you decide to schedule the next vote.
So I guess the big topic will be hours of operation. I don't know. I think my own feeling is, I came in here thinking 10 o'clock in the morning is where I'd land. I'd given actually less thought on the other side. The morning I was concerned about the impact on normal rush hour traffic. The evening side, I'm going to have to think about. What's interesting is that intersection at night is not. I'll put quotations around it. Alive, and this would make it alive at night. And is that?
You mean like between 8 and 10?
Yeah, there's not a lot of pedestrian traffic. In the village, there is more, so this would extend that down.
And if we're preventing people from picking stuff up in the morning and we're pushing them into hours after work, I mean, most people get out of work around 5:30. This would be, trip chaining where they would do a series of errands. This would be on their way home. 7 p.m. is actually kind of tight if you have one more errand to run.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I mean, I think we've had a robust conversation about hours, and I've got to think about it as well as the person that sort of put a stake in the ground. I do want to endorse some of the things that Mr. Hyatt said. I think there's some potential conditions there or some things that we should be thinking about when we return at a future meeting. So there's more than just the hours of operation conversation I think needs to be had.
So I think, yeah.
I'm also willing to have more restrictive hours for a test period, just to see how it works out. I don't know what those hours would be, but I'm willing to let them come back at this future date and say, here's what we found from these hours. Here's what we anticipate from extending the hours beyond this. And then, making a decision at that point.
Yeah, and that was in the spirit in which I offered my proposal. That's something we do with
Yeah,
some
we do it all
frequency
the time.
around restaurants.
Yeah.
We say, you're new to town, you're just opening up, let's talk about hours that are maybe more constrained than what you would really want. And if all goes well, come back and we'll talk about extending them.
And this is in the context of concern throughout town regarding other recreational marijuana facilities, and we just want to make sure that the community realizes that we're really trying to struggle with how we're going to deal with problems that we may not anticipate initially, and that we're really doing our so-called due diligence.
I think the hours issue is also about the neighborhood and making sure that there's not a lot of, a lot of extra activity in the early morning hours and later in the evening that could be disruptive. So, I think we need to ponder.
Yeah, no, I appreciate all those concerns. I would just ask the board as they review the draft and proposed conditions that I'll be sending to town council and she'll be working on with you, that reduced hours increases lines, and lines increase impact to the neighborhood. So please just keep that into consideration. And we'd rather get extended hours, reduce the lines, and come back and shorten the hours if it doesn't work, if police and transportation and folks are, up in arms about the hours per se. But I'm more concerned with reducing hours and then increasing lines and impact to the neighborhood. So just ask that you can consider that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll be taking this up either on the 20th or the 27th.
Okay.
We haven't figured that out yet. So we're trying to keep assuming we meet on the 20th, we're trying to keep our agenda very light that night because Thanksgiving week and so.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you everyone for attending. And what else is on the agenda here?
Collective bargaining.
Article 1.
Oh, and we don't have any collective bargaining agreements.
Good evening. We filed Article 1 of the December 2018 special town meeting in the hopes that we would be having an agreement that was ready for you to review tonight. Unfortunately, we don't, so the recommendation under this article is no action.
Okay. So we don't have to discuss this, right? Oh, this is a public hearing.
The public wants to discuss it.
Okay. So the public hearing on no collective bargaining agreements before us and a no action recommendation because of that. Okay. All those in favor of a no action recommendation, please say aye. Select Person Franco.
Aye.
Select Person Heller.
Aye.
Select Person Green. Aye. Select Person Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Now, I know, I'm seeing Mr. Spritz, and I suspect you're here for to see the appointments.
Actually, I was here to witness the discussion.
Oh, good, because we're not doing the appointments tonight. And I think we're done with our business. Great. Okay, thank you.
So please.
We should, are those all the same?